Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Sarah and I am the maker and creator with Red Panda Creations and Red Panda Doodles. And today on Red Panda Creates, we're going to finish epoxying that tumbler that we did last week. So as you remember that we went through everything with prepping and starting the tumbler. So now we're going to get in everything that you'll need to know as far as epoxying the tumbler and getting it all ready for its final steps. So come along and join. Alright guys, so I am getting the epoxy ready to put on the cup, and as you see here I have the two separate parts in each cup. This is part B, 12.5 milliliters, and this is part A, 12.5 milliliters. Now, when you are pulling up your epoxy, like I said last video, you do want to make sure that you do part A and let it settle before you move on to part B, because the surface tension of the part B, or excuse me, part A, since it is so much thicker, it does take a little bit of time to settle to get even with one. So if you don't wait before you're pulling up part B, you could pull up too much. Now, since I have 12.5 in each cup, it's going to be 25 milliliters in total. I didn't want to put that into the medicine cups and have it risk spilling out on me, so I did put that in a separate cup. And this is me putting the part B, which is the thinner side, in the cup first. It just makes it easier for it to mix together, because you're putting the thicker part into the thinner part. And then this is part A here, and you see how thick it is when it goes in. It would help to make sure that part A is not so thick is if you put your bottles of resin and epoxy into a warm bath. Then that helps them to be at the right temperature when you're mixing them together. Because again, the perfect temperature for working with epoxy is 75 to 85 degrees. That really is the most appropriate temperature that you want to have when you're working with epoxy, because if it's too cold, then you'll have a very cloudy mix, and that cloud is caused by the cold micro bubbles. Now, when you see here, as I'm mixing it, it is cloudy to begin with. And like I said last video, I liken it to when you're mixing sugar into water. It's kind of a cloudy, stringy consistency. So I'm just mixing it here really slowly, making sure that I am scraping the sides and scraping the bottom to make sure that it is all incorporated together, because if you do not mix it correctly, you will end up with a batch of epoxy that will not cure. It will remain tacky on your cup, and you don't want that. So you want to make sure that you measure out the portions correctly. That's why I said you do want to make sure you let it settle to get to the line, because I've done it multiple times where I have just been in a rush and poured up epoxy, and the next thing I know, I look at my part A and it's over the line, and then so I have to compensate by pouring extra into part B, and therefore I have way more epoxy than I really need. So in that case, always make sure that you have like a mold around or something like that, so that you can pour that extra epoxy off and not have it go to waste. Even though I've had cups of half full epoxy that I'd forgotten about and just left them in the cup. So I'm just checking my epoxy here to make sure that it is clear, because I want to make sure that there are no residual of those little stringy like textures going on, and that it is fully incorporated together. You'll know it will get a little bit, it'll be like a mixture of how thin B is and how thick A is. It'll be an in-between kind of texture, and then it will be completely clear. Now you may still have some bubbles in that. That's perfectly fine. Bubbles don't matter when you're mixing it, because what I always do is I do set my epoxy aside and I let it settle for a few minutes so that those bubbles can rise to the top and then burst as they come to the top. Alright guys, we're back, and I have my turner here with my cup on it, and right now it is just the glitter that was attached with the epoxy. There's nothing else on this yet. I did let my epoxy set, so it is completely bubble free at this point. Now when I apply my epoxy, I do apply just a little bit at a time, just because you don't want it spilling over the side and wasting it. So I do run just a little bead down the middle, and then I'll take a gloved finger and I'll rub that into a section and spread it out. And I'll make sure that I don't have any that's dripping off, because this is only 25 milliliters of epoxy, which even when I finished applying all the epoxy, it was just a little bit too much. You can do 25 milliliters on a 20 ounce with just this regular type of glitter. But I think you could have even been safe with just 20 mils as well. Just kind of go with kind of your gut, because I kind of went back and forth with 20 and 25, but I wanted to make sure that I did have enough. Now I do spread from top to the bottom rim all over, making sure that I have complete coverage over the entire cup, and then I go on the bottom as well, and you'll see me do that here just in a little bit. I'll take the epoxy onto the bottom of the cup as well to spread it out. Now when you're doing this, you will feel the glitter under your finger, and it will kind of feel like a medium grit sandpaper. That's perfectly fine, because again, this is just the first layer of epoxy. We are going to apply another layer over top of this. So this is just to seal down that glitter and get it so that it won't move, because once you go into sanding your epoxy to get it smooth, you will want at least two coats over it before you go into sanding it at all. You want to make sure that you also do carry epoxy up to the top of the rim as well. Now if you get some epoxy on the inside, that's perfectly fine. I will show you how we're going to remove that epoxy from the top as well, and everything that you'll need to do to kind of clean up the cup in the final stages of doing a beginner's cup. And now this is me putting the epoxy on the bottom here. I told you we'll get to it. Just took me a minute. But I want to make sure you do your bottoms as well, because there is a glitter there as well. So you want to make sure that's fully covered. Don't do it real thick on the bottom, because you don't want like a bubble to form or like a bulge or anything like that, because then the cup won't lay level and you'll have a wobbly cup, and nobody wants that. So this is me just adjusting the tumbler on the turner, because it wasn't quite level. So you do want to make sure that your turner is completely level and that your cup is level on the turner as well. Now this is a new turner for me. I got this from Amazon. and I haven't really like had a lot of play with it because the turners that I use for my business, I have like the big Mama Jamma one that I built, that's made out of wood, and the motors that you get from Amazon, and that's what I use. So I've worked on those so many times over the years, so I know that they are perfectly level. Even when I use my PVC arm in my pool noodles, I know that they are level. This one has it has a PVC arm, and it has a different type of foam with it, so I was a little unused to using it when I was putting that on the turner. But this is just making sure that the epoxy is completely spread even and level, and that there are no like missing spots that don't have epoxy on them. So I'm just running my finger through, and I'm like barely touching the cup, just to make sure that the epoxy is level and smooth. I don't really like press my finger down on the cup any. I just like kind of glide it over the top of the epoxy, just to make sure that it is one smooth coat. Now, I do want to say here in this layer of the epoxy, since this is a relatively thin coat, you are going to have glitter that you will see through the epoxy kind of sticking up like little spines on a cactus. Don't worry about that. That doesn't mean you have done anything wrong. That's just standard, kind of common and normal with your first base layer of epoxy. Because like I said, this layer is it's your groundwork, it's your foundation as far as what you're putting on the cup. So you're going to have little poke ups, you're going to have a rough edge on the bottom, and you're going to have a rough rim. Don't worry about those, don't freak out, because that is normal at this stage. Alright, so the next step that you're going to do to make sure that you have no bubbles in this first layer of epoxy, that it's crystal clear, is that you want to make sure that you have a torch. Now, I use a butane torch that I got at the hardware store. It is the Benzomatic. As you can see there, I'll focus in. Show you. It's the Benzomatic. It's refillable. This is a game changer for your epoxy. I know a lot of people like to use heat guns when they're trying to pop the bubbles in their epoxy. You don't really want a heat gun because that also has air behind it. And so that air is going to be moving your epoxy as well, causing ripples. Because at this point, you got to think that we've been working with this epoxy for quite a while. So you're getting to the end stages of your working time. So if you're applying a heat gun to it, you may cause ripples in your epoxy that will cure like that. You might cause fish eyes or things like that. So I'm just running my torch over the epoxy. I'm doing it really quick, making fast passes over it. I make sure that I hit it with a full rotation of the turner. I gave it just a little minute, just to kind of watch it and see if I have any more bubbles that reemerge, and then I will hit it again with the torch. And you want to go real fast. You don't want to stay in one spot on your epoxy too long, because you can burn your epoxy, and it'll actually show up in the epoxy. You'll have little darkened areas that are like brown or yellow. So this is me going over it again, and I'm just making quick passes. You just want the flame to kind of barely kiss the epoxy, because it's just that heat and the carbon dioxide that comes out of the torch that is bursting those bubbles. So that's what you want. And that's why you also apply a very thin layer because if you have a thick layer on there, because I know a lot of people like to do flood coats. If you do a flood coat where you apply a lot of epoxy on your cup, those bubbles can't rise to the top, and so then you'll have trapped micro bubbles in your epoxy that the heat and the carbon dioxide can't reach. So just make sure that you always apply a thin layer, go over the whole cup with it. Don't have a section, don't go over a section too long so you don't burn your epoxy or anything like that. And then you're just gonna let the cup spin. Some people apply like a Tupperware container over the top of it to keep like floaties out of it, or like bugs from flying in it, because bugs are some reason extremely attracted to epoxy. So you can put like something like that over it to keep it where lint and floaties in the air don't get on top of your epoxy. Now, if you do have something get stuck in your epoxy, I see these tweezers. This is what I use, and I just kind of pluck out any like little lint pieces, or if I have a bug that gets stuck in there, I'll check it before I do my second layer, and I'll just kind of pull those out. At that point, your epoxy is still on the tacky side, so it's easy just to kind of like pull them out, and then it'll settle down with your second layer of epoxy. And then that's it, guys. That's all you do for this first layer, and then you'll apply the second layer after this. Alright guys, that is everything that we're going to do with the tumbler today. On next time, we're going to finish up the tumbler. So we're going to do all the necessary sanding of the edges and the rim. We're going to do its final coat of epoxy, and we're going to clean it up for shipping and everything. This tumbler will be bare. It won't have a decal or anything on it like that. Don't worry, you will get tons of videos about decals and things like that. I will be going into just a specific video on creating, finding, and doing everything from offsets and things like that on